We know that Jesus says if we are not pure of heart, we cannot see God. So how does one who has been so consumed with lust and with other sin in general, how does a person overcome their sin and be so pure that they could stand before the presence of God? In Mark chapter 7, Jesus points out what the root of the problem is. He says, "What comes out of a man is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, fornication, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a man." And so from these words of Jesus, we could understand how bad the problem is, and it is much worse than we think. Because Jesus points out that all of these evil things don't come from the outside, but they come from within us. At our core, they come from our very heart. What comes out of the human heart are thoughts and our feelings. And so what Jesus is saying is that the problem is within humanity. From the very beginning, Adam and Eve broke off from unity with God through their sin, through their rejection of God, and that is what happens. We become confused. Our desires get the best of us. It's called concupiscence. We are weak and we cannot save ourselves, and that is the first thing for somebody who is struggling with lustful sin to realize and to admit. But the good news is that Jesus, knowing how weak we are, knowing how much we constantly fall into sin, chose not to save us from outside of this world, from above this world, by staying in heaven. But he chose to save us by coming to the core of the problem, by coming to the very root of the problem, by assuming a human heart. Jesus became a human being like us in all things but sin. And so he now, God himself, has a human heart, and he will save us through that human heart. And so how do we overcome impurity? We have to become like Jesus Christ. And I know many of you that are struggling with these sins have probably heard that many times, but I want to make it very practical for you. How do we become like Jesus Christ? First, we have to stop being like our sinful nature. We have to reject our sin. And so if Christ is going to fill us with his grace, what does that mean first? What's the first step? Is we have to empty ourselves of ourselves. We have to work to clear room for Jesus. Just like if your room is dirty, you can't just pray for your room, or if your car is dirty, you can't just pray for your car or room to be clean. You have to get up and work. You have to organize things. You have to throw away the bad things. You have to make room for the good things. And that's what Jesus wants us to do. He wants us to clean up our hearts, to clean up our lives. And so the first thing that you should do after watching this video is immediately go and get rid of the temptations. If it's a website that you use, find a way to block it. If it's a person that you constantly sin with, get it clear with that person that you will no longer be doing this, or you cannot continue the relationship. If it is a place that you constantly go to that leads you into sin, cut that place out of your life. This is a battle, and our souls are at stake, and we cannot just sit around and let the devil push us into sin and let us fall so deeply into sins while being so far from God. So the next thing that we can do after we work on emptying ourselves and cleaning up our lives is we have to fill ourselves, because Jesus says if a demon leaves us and he comes back and he finds emptiness, if he finds a void, he will go back and he will bring 7 more demons. And so if we empty ourselves of something bad, we have to fill it immediately with something good. And the first things that I want to talk about are not the best things that I'm going to get to, but good things like exercise, good habits like reading, being with your family, doing something beneficial for your life. But then it gets deeper than that. There are the best things that we have to add to our lives, and those are receiving God's grace, which come to us through, firstly, the sacraments of the church. Receive the Eucharist. And if you cannot receive the Eucharist because you are in the state of mortal sin, and in this case, if it's because of a lustful or a sexual sin, any sin in general, in order to receive the Eucharist without mortal sin, you know that you have to go to confession. And going to confession is going to cleanse your soul of sin. So find a way to get to confession, confess any sin that comes to your mind that you've done, and receive God's forgiving mercy. After you receive confession, you need to rely on the grace of God. If you keep on falling into mortal sin, keep on going to confession. Do not stop. Even if you go so many times, do not be discouraged. If you fall, you have to get back up. If you get dirty, you have to clean yourself. And in this case, Jesus picks you up. Jesus cleans you. Jesus makes you holy and pure. And how can he do it if you're not approaching the sacraments? And then after cleansing your life of all of the evil, trying to fill your life with good, especially with God's grace, you have to keep it consistent. You have to develop a strong prayer life. So no matter what you are doing as far as prayer goes, if you are still struggling with lust and with sexual sin, you're not doing enough. You need to pray more. You need to read the Bible to have an encounter with God's word every day. Pray the rosary. Mother Mary's prayers are so powerful, especially when it comes to purity, because she is the image of purity for all of humanity. We have Jesus, who is God and who is completely pure, but Mary is a woman, a human being who was completely pure of sin. And she is an example for us because she was so pure that Jesus dwelt within her. And that is the goal of our lives, to get Jesus to dwell within us. Why? Because our hearts are impure. We are sinners, we are weak, and we need the heart of Christ to become our heart. And it will only happen if we are in such unity with God that we are able to receive his grace of forgiveness, his grace that gives us the strength to overcome these sins. We have to realize that we cannot do this on our own. We are human sinners. We cannot save ourselves. God can and wants to save us, but we have to make ourselves available to his grace. We have to invite him into our hearts by putting away the bad, putting the good into our lives, by approaching the sacraments, by having a stronger prayer life, by also talking to those around us who love us and who want to support and help us. The devil wants us to keep these sins to ourselves. He wants it to be a struggle just between us and him. And if it's between just us and him, he will win. But we sometimes forget that we have our guardian angel, we have the saints, we have Jesus himself, who is infinitely more powerful than the devil. And Jesus works through those around us. We should talk to those around us about the sins that we struggle with, and we should ask for their help and guidance. Because we know that if we open up our hearts, God will come in. He will give us his grace. He will give us the strength to overcome any sin that we struggle with in his way and in his time.